I think we're going to have a bunch of open standards that these metaverse platforms can leverage to achieve interoperability. But I agree wholeheartedly, just like you do, that it won't be a single cohesive experience. It's going to be a bunch of metaverse-like experiences. I'm sure some will be better than others, but at the end of the day, like the root here is it's going to be a 3D experience.
You're listening to the Web3 Creators Podcast, where we speak to the brightest minds and builders in crypto, DeFi, NFTs, and the metaverse. Our goal is to give you the absolute best tools for building a thriving business in the Web3 space. Now, here's your host, Hernan Arber. Let's start creating.
Creators, welcome back to a brand new episode of the Web3 Creators Podcast. We have with me none less than Beau Button from Atlas Reality. So, hey, Beau, how are you?
Doing well. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. It's always a pleasure to have new guests on the podcast. And I guess we need to start with a shout out to Carson, who linked between us. So he made the connection, and it's important to thank the guy that made our connection possible. But it's great. It's a pleasure meeting you. I'd love to get to know your story, and I see that Atlas is kind of a long-term project of you. So we're gonna dig a bit deeper there. But let's start with a small intro. Who are you? Let our audience know you.
Yeah, so my name, like you said, is Beau Button. I've been a technologist I'm 39. I started when I was 8. It's kind of scary to say the number 31 years out there. I wasn't a professional at the age 8, so I don't know at what point I actually could consider myself a bona fide technologist. But I started working professionally at 16 as a web developer doing e-commerce and content management systems. And from there, I kind of just dove headfirst into serial entrepreneurialism. I did have a few gigs as an employee learning like enterprise development. A lot of times I was a contractor working for large companies under a placement agency. But yeah, I mean, basically enterprise software. And then about 6 years ago, I co-founded Atlas Reality. Well, at the time, we founded a company called Cerberus Interactive. We rebranded because nobody could spell it or pronounce it. So now we're Atlas Reality. But yeah, we started off building games for other companies. And then about a year into it, we decided to invest some time and money into our own intellectual property and built out our first game called Atlas Empires. And then about a year and a half ago, we launched our second title called Atlas Earth.
Okay. And both of them are games, right? And
yes, that's correct. Yeah.
And are they AR related games? Because the Atlas Reality also spells
AR. That's exactly why we chose Atlas Reality. Well, that's not exactly. It was the domain name. It was available, but the AR acronym or abbreviation did resonate with us in the most traditional AR sense, where you hold your phone up like Pokémon Go or any of these other games, and you're looking through the actual or looking at the screen and having like superimposed objects on the map. We're not that type of AR. We did initially start off with that type of mechanic, but we learned a lot from the Pokemon Go audience. They would turn that off. It becomes a nuisance. So what we consider AR is just simply the composition of things that we put on top of a real world map. So we do build location-based games. So very similar to Ingress, Pokemon Go, Harry Potter's Wizards Unite, etc., where we're using real geospatial data. So AR in this context is we've got a map and we augment the map.
Okay, that's super cool. And then I want to dive deep on geolocation, because I also was part of a project that was doing like proof of location type of blockchain. Anyway, let's connect the dots and get you to the Web3 space, because I imagine if you founded Atlas Reality back then, there was no blockchain or smart contracts to get involved or any way to decentralize that system, was there?
There were options. I mean, not 6 years ago, it wasn't really even on my radar. At that time, it was, the speculation, about Bitcoin. The Ethereum virtual machine was probably, I'm not even sure when that initial white paper was released, to be quite honest. But when we started the company,
2016 or 15, yeah.
Yeah, so it was like right at the precipice, like we were right, but like right after all of that. But it was probably way too immature for us to even like look at it as something serious to build on top of. But the first game that we built, it wasn't in this play to earn genre. This was before the Web3 term was being thrown around as like the future. So Atlas Empire is our first game. Is really just a standard Web2, if you will, location-based game that marries the mechanics from Clash of Clans and Pokemon Go. And then our second game, which is Atlas Earth, the reason we're in this Web3 category, and this is probably going to surprise a lot of people because we're talking about Web3, is not because we're a blockchain-based gaming company, but we looked at what was the promise of Web3, or at least as a consumer, what the consumer thought the promise of Web3 was. And we kind of boiled off all of the fat, both marketing and these fly-by-night companies that are releasing tokens and then disappearing, and then like the technology. The technology is brilliant. Like academically, the blockchain is brilliant, but the consumer very seldomly gives any. They don't care about that. What they want is like, what am I getting? What is the benefit? Obviously, people associate blockchain with security. Me personally, I think it's about validation. There's a very standardized way for someone to verify and validate that they own a digital asset. But like truly as a gamer, no one was knocking on our door asking for any of that. So what we did is we kind of looked at what the Web3 promise was, how people were failing at delivering that promise, and said, let's just give them the promise and build it on Web2 kind of tech. And that's what we did. So we're in this Web3 space, but we do not have any on-chain games. We have no tokens. We do not use smart contracts. We are working on an internal title because the timing wasn't right. The onboarding to Web3 is difficult. Your dollar spent for marketing. If you're losing 90% on the sign-up page, you're just literally pissing money away. And we saw that our expertise was that top of funnel. We've perfected get people into the game, and you really couldn't do that very well with Web3. So again, it's a Web2 game that is in the play to earn genre, that is inspired by Web3 promises, but is not a blockchain game.
Okay, and have you gotten some adoption onto those games?
Yes. Actually, Atlas Earth right now, if you were to add up all of the daily active and monthly active users for every virtual real estate platform that's on chain, decentralized, Decentraland, Sandbox, Uplane, we run circles around them. Right now, we're at around 1.7 million users, and we average around 400,000 daily active users. To date, we've cashed out. So our players and our economy have actually moved money out of our ecosystem, out of our economy, to the tune of around $200,000. So again, play to earn. We're not giving tokens. We're not giving any kind of crypto. You're actually earning fiat. You're earning USD. So there's things you do in the game. Again, it's a virtual real estate platform. So at the core of it is you're buying land, and everything that we allow the player to do in the game is really to motivate them or to allow them to buy more land, because the land is what's generating that income. We call it virtual rent.
And are there people like actually renting those spaces and making use of the real estate that the people are buying?
Not yet. So right now, the way it works and the way that we kind of position it is when you buy land, Atlas Reality is your tenant. So the land is basically for sale, and you buy the land, and we're the tenant. We're the ones, the ecosystem that we built around. So obviously money has to come from somewhere. So when you buy the land, that's $5 per piece of land. There's ways to lower that cost. If you buy larger, buckets of in-game currency, the more in-game currency you buy, the unit economics kind of, work in your favor. But you watch ads. So we again, you can't pay people to watch ads. So the way it's engineered is, that rent that you accrue every second of the day for one piece of land, you can accelerate it by doing things in the game. And this is that, like, it was inspired by a game called Venture Capitalists. I'm kind of impervious to games. Oddly enough, I don't really play them, but I love to figure out how they work. And I installed Venture Capitalists 7 years ago. And it was the first game on mobile where I was just like hooked. I'm like, God, what is like, why is it working on me? And it was at the top of the screen, there was this number, and it was your revenue. as a venture capitalist, like you could run lemonade stands, you can, hire a manager for your lemonade stand. And it was relatable, as a business owner, I was like, this is fun. Well, how can I optimize this? So I became kind of obsessed with it. But, the same mechanic works here is you've got that virtual rent, you see it, it's in your face, it's moving several times per second. But all you can do in the game is basically increase that virtual rent. But you don't right now rent the property. Like I said, Atlas Reality, to kind of distill how it works, is your tenant. In the secondary market, which is something we'll be launching this year, we're also introducing a companion application that's going to allow players to build on this land. So again, right now, all you can do is strategically buy land. You can speculate on why this land may be more valuable in the future than others. Obviously, location. Everybody understands if you buy land in a highly trafficked area, theoretically, at least as it relates in reality, it's going to be more expensive in the future. But building is probably going to be, I think, essential for the secondary market to really survive. Like, why would I buy somebody else's plot of land if there's nothing on it or if there's no motivation for players to come there? But we do anticipate allowing players to rent when we flesh out that kind of, secondary market. Right now, we're still working on the primary market, trying to get the buildings and all of that, facilitated.
Yeah, and are you planning on like transitioning like the current in-game assets to some kind of a NFT based Web3 type of assets?
Yeah, it's not out of the realm of possibilities, but our user base, and this was Pandora's box. I sent out a questionnaire and said, for those folks who are familiar with Web3 and the blockchain, answer these handful of questions. And I just wanted to know from their perspective, what would motivate them to either do more in the game or do less in the game, whichever direction they, and I both sides were represented. Oh, if you go Web3 and blockchain, I'm less inclined to use it because I think that's a scam or I don't understand it. It was like kind of a mix. But we are working on a Web3 based game. And right now, the idea is we're not going to pollute Atlas Earth with Web3 tech because we have a really solid top of funnel experience. We're able to acquire users, get them in the game, they're sticky. And we don't want to jeopardize that. But the next game will more than likely not be exactly like Atlas Earth, and it will more than likely leverage NFTs. They will be on chain. Which chain? Honestly, which chain I'm in love with changes monthly. I mean, it used to change monthly. Now it's like quarterly. It's like, oh, it's Avalanche. Oh, it's Polygon. Oh, what is this other one that's coming out kind of deal. But we are most definitely heading in that direction. But it's probably not going to be with our primary game, Atlas Earth. There may be some mechanics that dovetail into the crypto space, but those will more than likely be related to when you cash your money out. What we see a lot of players doing is cashing that fiat out, moving it into their checking account, then moving it into Coinbase so then they can, invest speculatively. We're missing out on the spread. So what we're contemplating, and this is something that we just announced in the game, it's kind of a coming soon, is a crypto off-ramp. So you can take your cash out of your game, out of our ecosystem. Well, not necessarily out of our ecosystem. That's the key there is out of your cash account, move it into your crypto account in our ecosystem. So when you do that purchase, we can participate in that spread. Again, this business model only works if we can make a little money on everything so we can pay back that virtual rent.
Yeah, of course. No, I get it. And so tell us a bit about your journey, Beau. You've been growing. Are you like a small team working on the game? How's the company built?
Yeah, it depends on what your definition of small is. When we started the company, it was two people. It was myself, and then at the time, he was a contractor. He is now our third co-founder. About 2 years ago, we officially recognized employee number one as an official co-founder. He was instrumental in our ability to build the games. He is our game developer. I'm a back-end guy, so initially we worked really close together. Today, we have 27 people, so not necessarily tiny. I don't necessarily want this team to be 200, 300 people. I'm a big fan of these small teams.
I love pretty well sized, about 27.
Yeah, I mean, I know everybody. I have a good understanding of their capabilities. I love that. In a previous venture, we got to around that 70, 80 person mark, and it was kind of difficult, to remember everybody's experience and their stories. I just love having that relatability with employees because I am genuinely friends with them. But yeah, we're 27 people today.
That's great. And so drive us a bit about your personal journey towards growing as a founder, versus what made you make the switch, and what how are the struggles of being an entrepreneur and founding the your own company, compare against being a contractor or working for another company.
Yeah, I mean, I think it comes down to my personality. No matter what I'm doing, it could be, home remodeling, even cutting, like whatever task I'm doing, I've always had this kind of lens that allowed me to see through all of the profit margins. So, if you're paying somebody $200 to patch a hole in your wall, my brain's like, well, what's the material cost? What's the labor cost? Like, well, there's a cost of skill. I don't know how many hours it's going to take me to become a drywaller. But I've always had that lens, no matter what I'm doing, even like auto mechanics, and like that's just my brain. I don't know, like I'm genetically predispositioned to think that way. And for a lot of things, now that we have access to the internet, I can learn the skill part in due time. So from an early age, I always looked at like, all right, well, why would I work for an employer who's making X and I'm making 1/1000th of X? Now, I did start off working professionally for a company. I was 16. There was no way at the time, I didn't have the capital. I didn't have the business, prowess to actually start a business, get clients. But for about 4 years, I learned from that company and all of my coworkers on, quite frankly, what not to do. It was a great experience. I can't say it was the best run business on planet Earth, but my personality, I'm blunt. I have no filter. So almost everything that could go against you as being a good employee, like just shut up. Don't say anything. Like that's not it's not my DNA. So when someone says something, I'm like, that's bullshit. I have to call that out. And that's not really a popular thing in companies. So I think that's what kind of motivated me, is I wanted to feel comfortable in what I was doing, and having to work within somebody else's guardrails made me uncomfortable. And then on top of that, like I said, I always saw the margins, and I'm like, I can just do it myself. So at a young age, right out of high school, a good friend of mine and I started a web development business, and we saw, financially, it was a success. We didn't cash out for hundreds of $millions, not even probably hundreds of thousands of dollars, but we were both able to make a really good salary on our own terms. And that's when I knew. I was like, all right, well, this is life. I have the freedom to take a day off. I have the freedom to go. Like, you can work what you want. It was kind of like the gig economy before the gig economy was a thing. But that's kind of what made me an entrepreneur, is my personality, my kind of like visibility into profit margins. And I've always been one. I have an insatiable appetite to learn new things, and not just tech. Like I use the sheetrock example only because I've probably done 20 or 30 sheetrock jobs on my own or for people I know, because it was a challenge. And I love good challenges. And sheetrocking, quite frankly, is probably one of the most difficult things you could do if you're obsessively compulsive like I am, because it takes a lot of energy to make it perfect.
Yeah. I actually don't even know what sheetrocking is.
So I don't know, historically, it's called gypsum board. So in the States, when someone builds a house using 2x4 frame construction, we normally put gypsum board, AKA sheetrock, on the wall. And that comes in 4x8 foot sheets. And when you walk into someone's house, if it's not done properly, I can, almost like a superhuman, I can see the seams where they didn't, feather it. They didn't do a good enough job. So sheetrocking, if someone, like, you have children, I have 3 kids, they'll hit holes, so they'll punch holes in the wall, and then, all right, well, I'm going to patch that. Because I'm obsessive compulsive, I don't want to see the patch. So that's kind of what started me on that journey. But that's just homeowner stuff. I am not obviously making any money. This is not my desire. But it's one of those skills that if you're into that kind of stuff, it's fun. It can be fun. It can also be stressful.
Yeah, no, it's always useful. My father-in-law is kind of our handyman. I kind of stopped. I'm not that of a handyman, although I have some tools and I can do some basic stuff, but never as far as like fixing a hole in the wall perfectly or something. But
again, it's when you're young and you don't have disposable income, but you have time and you have knowledge, and you're kind of eager to learn new things. It made a lot of sense. But would I start doing it today? Absolutely not. But when someone says, hey, can you take a look at this? I'll offer my services pro bono, because it's a challenge.
So let's speak a bit about holes in the wall, and tell me, what are the holes that you identify on the blockchain Web3 space that kind of make you hesitant to say, okay, listen, we are all in on blockchain. We're going to take all of our games, decentralize them, make them run on smart contracts and an open public ledger, and maybe try to abstract the the funnel of the entry layer for the users to whenever they only want to cash out. So all new items are going to be NFTs, but it's all going to be like transparent for the users until they say, okay, give me my money. I want this in Ethereum, Matic, EOS, whatever.
Absolutely. I mean, regardless of what we end up doing, the key word, and you hit the nail on the head, is it must be transparent. When you play Call of Duty, you don't care what relational database, what public cloud, what programming language. I mean, I'm sure there's a subset of Call of Duty fans that are just like, I'd love to know how this works. But like 99% of the population of Call of Duty, players don't really concern themselves with the stack. It's just a fact of life. So I'm not sure like why it happened in Web3, but like we put the stack first. Even before the users, it's like, we're a Web3 game. We use NFTs.
That's pretty much because the stack became investable now, and then
yes.
Nobody owns HTML, nobody owns HTTPS or SMTP, so nobody cares about which protocol you're using for having a live call or for using Zoom or chatting on Messenger. But now all of a sudden, everyone cares which blockchain you're using, because everyone has a bag of some sort,
a share of, they have a slice of the pie. No, that makes a lot of sense, and quite frankly, I think that's what and it's getting better. So again, for us, for the last 5 years, my partner, who's user acquisition, marketing, growth, he spent a lot of time trying to figure out how to get users. And once you've got those users, you have to do a really good job to get them through that funnel, regardless of what you're building. You have to educate them. Like, if it's a tutorial, like in video games, tutorials are obviously, well-known things. You go through and they teach you how to, play the game. Some tutorials, I go through the tutorial and I'm like a robot. I'm just clicking where the arrows are and I still don't know how to play the game. But we've kind of, perfection is one of those words. Like we will never achieve perfection, but we've kind of mastered that top of funnel onboarding experience for these games. We've mastered how do we find the players, how do we manage our cost of user acquisitions, and how do we track revenue for those players. And when we looked at all of the Web3 players, Web3 games, there was a brick wall, and that brick wall wasn't because the design team decided to put it there. It was because of the tech stack that they chose. All right, well, you need a wallet. You need to connect the wallet. 2 years ago, there weren't as many vendors that allowed you to basically transparently, provision wallets. You'd have to use Wallet Connect, or you'd have to physically, create a wallet in the game. And that was a roadblock.
In most cases.
Yeah, I know. And that's like, we're kind of waiting. And I've got, I have relationships with probably about a dozen vendors that are in this space that are working towards this goal, where they offer a managed service for companies like ours. Even the game company, the game engine that we use, we're starting to see some movement in the Web3 direction. So out of the box, we don't have to own that aspect of it. And, they kind of solve that initial, brick wall problem. But that's really like, once I feel like, most people understand what the blockchain is and how to manage their own wallets. I'm a champion.
I don't know if we'll ever get there.
Maybe. I mean, look, that's the other side.
Personally, I don't think people need to understand blockchain or how it works to be using it. Just as many people don't understand how the internet protocols work.
Well, no, that's and that's. I haven't seen anything, but for me, I would love for a company like, for instance, I think Shopify just in the last 2 days announced that they now have Web3 tie-ins, but you would never know. You're just buying from a Shopify store. That's the kind of platform. We don't want to build that, to be quite honest. We're a game development company. We don't want to go down any more rabbit holes. What we're looking for is a partner that can allow us to do that. So if it's a banking company, if it's Stripe, if it's Coinbase, like we just want somebody to basically abstract all of that from the end users, and they're just going to sign up for a game. And like you said, behind the scenes, we're executing methods on smart contracts. We're moving things around on a specific blockchain. But when you want to move those assets out of our ecosystem, to put them on OpenSea, you can do it. Like right now, you really can't do that because we control the primary market, we control the secondary market, and what that really, it's just a database. We could theoretically create interchangeable assets, but not use it. Like why? If our goal is to basically provide interoperability or the ability to exchange assets, you would be foolish not to leverage the blockchain. It's already built, it's already ready to go, and there's so many things that you can do with it. So that is definitely something we're going to leverage. But I mean, right now it's the onboarding that's the problem.
Well, it does require also a bit of a mind shift in terms of that you are perceiving your, Atlas Reality as the owner of all the assets that are produced in the game because they're coded in the game. And when you're providing them as NFTs, you have to, kind of really sip in and understand the fact that now you're providing them with the ownership. And if they take those assets and do whatever you can that was not your original intended purpose, you'll need to be okay with it because once you provide those assets, they're no longer yours.
It's a double-edged sword. So I mean, I've yet to see, and internally we've been working on, and we have a provisional patent on an NFT approach that I think will really allow this genuine interoperability. Like one of the problems we struggle with is game A has weapon A, game B has weapon B. The game A weapon was very thoughtfully designed and balanced for game A's ecosystem and environment. If you move game A's weapon A into game B, it could destroy the economy in game B. So this idea of like, outside of avatars and cosmetics, which I know that's a huge market, I cannot relate to that. I am not your guy. I don't care about costumes. Like I know a lot of children. My 15-year-old son, I remember with Fortnite, like that was everything. But like that doesn't resonate with me. But like what I think is the future is no matter what I'm earning, it's just like in real life. I've got assets. I can move. I can go to my relative's house. I can bring things with me. Like we're trying to figure out how do we achieve that genuine portability. And if you move the entire aspect, the entire weapon from game A to game B, that's difficult. So what we're doing is we're thinking about it different. And like you're still earning things, but instead of earning the entire weapon, you're earning assets that you can compose into things. And those are the things that can make sense in other games. So this is our next game, our third title. I can't announce what it is, but at the end of the day, it's blockchain based, and it will be leveraging our patented technology for composing NFTs into in-game assets that can be thoughtfully balanced. It's not going to be the Wild West. If I come with a bazooka into Pac-Man, well, not that you'd have a gun in Pac-Man, I don't know where the hell that came from, but you get the drift. You just have to be thoughtful about how those other assets. But I get it as a user. If I grind and I earn something, I love the idea of being able to have that in a wallet, moving it to a hardware wallet, putting it in my gun safe and saying, that's mine. You're not going to take it. And if you go out of business, that NFT, technically, it may be less valuable if there's no real utility in your ecosystem. But if there's another game, another company that wants to allow you to use it, then maybe it's more valuable. Or maybe there's another player who just doesn't feel like grinding, which is more often the case. Is somebody just doesn't feel like grinding and they're going to buy it.
Or somebody wants it as as an accolade or a medal.
That's exactly right. Look, don't undermine clout. Clout is king in Web3. And quite frankly, that's honestly what kind of deterred me originally. I'm not a clout person. I don't really care. But like even in our game that's off chain, we have titles. Like the person who owns the most land in a city is the official mayor. Same with the state governor, same with the country president. And, this was a mechanic that made sense when we built the game, but like I had no idea on how popular this would be. But like I'd say probably a third of the user base, all they're doing is competing to put their name as mayor or governor or president. And like I said, cloud is king. Like if you've got this one exclusive skin or you've got this one NFT and you can use it as your avatar on Twitter, I get it. I do get it. And look, that's great. If you've got that kind of disposable income or that amount of free time to grind, I want to provide that to you.
Mm-hmm. So before we get into, I want to connect us a bit to the metaverse because I think your game is what you're doing on Atlas Reality probably has a lot of, or you've given that a thought. Have you heard of a game called Upland? I
Yes.
think they're also US based. I know the founders, and the way we connected is because I founded EOS Israel back in the day, and they were building their whole blockchain. All their transactions are happening on EOS. Although their inner token, like UPX, is not a tradable token. It's only an internal ecosystem token, which has worked it has worked very well with them. They have huge adoption. So I think, do you know about them? Have you heard?
I do, yeah. No, we monitor them. I mean, they're similar in the sense that we're location based, they're location based. I think the difficulty with Upland for most, and this is a sentiment you can see in any forum, and the same thing could be said about our game, is it's not just the technical barrier, the game barrier. Like it's a game that requires quite a bit of understanding of how it genuinely works. So it's not for your casual folks. But there are a lot of diehard Upland users that are also in our communities, and they often it gets heated sometimes about what the pros and cons are. But no, we're very familiar with Upland, and I love the work they're doing. Honestly, one thing I love about how they operate is they've taken it a step further, and instead of dividing the globe into just a bunch of squares, they're actually using the real data for the parcels from the local municipalities. I spent 8 years of my life in that space as a government contractor building out another company. This was the company that I had mentioned. We had about 80 employees. It was called Archon Information Systems. And what we did was we would work with the government to sell distressed real estate. So when I saw that Upland was using all of that geospatial data, I had these flashbacks. I grew up in Louisiana. They're kind of behind the times. The tech here for all of our elected officials, we had some that were using Microsoft Excel to manage tax liability. It was a nightmare. So bless their hearts. Upland, that was not an easy task, and I think they nailed it. I love how they do the individual parcels, because if I want to buy an actual building, I can buy the actual building, instead of like in our world, it's a little different. You're just buying the land, and we're kind of creating that superimposed layer on top of it. We're less concerned about the buildings that are actually on the land today in reality.
So that it's great that you know them. So we will send the kind of good regards, which reminds me of maybe calling you down to the pod for someday. I like that you spoke well about them, even though you guys are more or less competing for the same land in this.
No,
meta.
absolutely. Look, you don't get anywhere being jealous. I admire what they're doing, and like I said, I mean, we've got some similarities. I do think there's an overlap in our user base, but there's no discounting the fact that they clearly understand how to build a virtual real estate game on chain, and I think they do it better than anybody else.
Nice. That's well said. So kudos to our friends at Upland, and let's speak about the metaverse a bit. What are your beliefs around that? Do you think that Atlas Reality is going to connect in some way, or do you think it's mainly just a buzzword to represent 3D websites and experiences, and that it's mainly just to build hype on top of Facebook's move to rename themselves to Meta?
I think it's all of the above. It's all of the above.
Okay.
Like it's very clear that we are moving more towards a three-dimensional internet. Now, I won't be using a 3D Wikipedia metaverse for anything, but I'm a proud owner. I've been I was an early adopter of the DK1 headsets for virtual reality. Not that I was building software, but like I was fortunate enough to have some disposable income, and I was like, I need to see this for myself. And I've seen this tech kind of evolve to the point where I have the Oculus Quest, and it's mind blowing. It's absolutely mind blowing. And there are very few things to me as a technologist that like literally stop me in my tracks. One of them here recently is Chat GPT. I understand how it works. I mean, so many people have promised this, but this is a company, OpenAI, that has delivered on it. But like back to the VR, back to the metaverse, it's like I do see in the next few years that there will be areas of the internet. So I'm not a fan of just calling things the metaverse, because I don't know how to define the metaverse. The way I like to describe both the metaverse and Web3 is it's just the natural evolution of the internet and how we access people, information, etc. I'm still going to have a web browser. It's probably going to support like some type of open VR standard. So if I do go to a website and I do have, let's say, a headset connected via USB, I can choose to have part of my experience in VR or the metaverse, or I could use it, non-stereograph, like I could just use it in the browser like it's a video game. And this is where people are like, oh, the metaverse is just a video game. I think it's built on video game technology, obviously, but I do see a future where you might go to the mall in the browser in 3D. Instead of just going to someone's website and seeing a directory of merchants, maybe I do want to walk around the mall like I'm walking around in Fortnite. Maybe I do want to see the products on a shelf because it's familiar. And when I click it, maybe it is a digital product that is an NFT, or maybe it's a 3D representation of the actual product. And maybe my avatar is precisely my dimensions, and I can see how it looks on me. And then I click buy and it shows up in reality, probably, or ideally it wouldn't be from Amazon. Don't get me wrong, I love Amazon, but I'd love to see some competition there. I really would love to see some other company compete with Amazon. But no, look, I think, like I said, it's kind of all of the above. Where Atlas sits here is right now, we're in the metaverse space because that's where people want us to be, because you're walking around, you're earning things. So there's that Web3 kind of like dovetail. But in reality, we're not Meta, we're not Horizon Worlds, we're not a 3D environment where you can walk around and interact with other humans. We are working with partners on trying to figure out, now that we have so many eyeballs and you can only buy land, like the next natural thing for us is to build on that land. Well, what's the next natural thing after you've got 3D buildings? Well, why not have a different point of view or different perspective and have a mode of the game where, like, now you've got a neighborhood of people who are landowners who built land, and there's this economy. Why not let people drop in and just start interacting like it's a Roblox game? This is the first time I mentioned Roblox, but another company that I adore is Roblox. I think
my kid was so hooked to Roblox, we had to take the iPad out.
It's a drug. You need an intervention. But as a technologist, I installed Roblox Studio. Like, I had no idea. I heard about Roblox. I heard that kids were building games, and I'm thinking, that's cute, great. So one day I was like, you know what? I'm going to figure out how all this works. I installed Roblox Studio, and for about 4 days, I was speechless. I was like, this is not just a game. This is one of the best thought out, well thought designed platforms for building games that I've ever seen. Even compared to the enterprise tools and the expensive, software that we use, I'm like, this is genius. And then you've got the ability to deploy these without thinking about servers and users and any of that. You build and you deploy, and the revenue sharing model is brilliant because as a creator, if I don't have any visitors, I don't spend any money. If I have a lot of visitors, Roblox makes money and I make money. I love that. That's where I really want the future of the cloud and like all of these software as a service. Like, we need to be thinking more about, like, how do people get started with no cost? Let people just get on the internet, use their time, learn something new. And obviously we both need to make money, but like, I love the way that they've built out their business model. And the technology is mind blowing. And obviously their revenue numbers are off the charts. Like, it's sickening.
Yeah. Well, I think that they have a much better chance of landing the metaverse right than most of the metaverse typical companies.
Look,
and I think that's because they have that UX right, which is what 99% of Web3 native companies haven't got that right. Now, I do think so. I think the metaverse is definitely the future in terms of how we experience and the internet and virtual experiences. I have a problem with the prefix of the word the metaverse, because any game or e-commerce company or social platform will have kind of their own metaverse. I think it's a bit delusional to think that all virtual experiences are somehow going to be interconnected into this, singular metaverse that you plug in. That's the virtual world interconnected, right?
I agree. I mean, look, it's interoperability is hard. Even before I got into video games and this idea of like NFTs and interoperability between game assets and different economies, like in the enterprise space, you've got different systems that need to talk to each other. And honestly, I could probably say that like a third of my time was spent on solving these interoperability problems, systems to systems integration. If there's no standards of how do you exchange data from one electronic medical record system to it? Like you spend a lot of time mapping things, and that's just a waste. Now for a business, it could be, life or death. But what I'm a big fan of, obviously what I love about the internet is it is built on open standards. So you've got HTML, XHTML, you've got CSS, you've got all of these things that are well defined. There's consortiums, there's RFCs that describe how they work, and then you've got implementations of those. I think the metaverse is going to remain fragmented. Like you said, it won't be one giant platform. I do not want to see Meta win this. I do not want that. I think we're going to have hundreds of metaverse experiences. And so I love how you're thinking about it. It's not the metaverse. It's a metaverse experience. It's mine. It could be proprietary. But as a content creator, what I really want to see, well, as a person who appreciates content creators, I don't create a whole lot of content, but I love the idea of being able to create things that can operate or be used in all of these metaverses. And one of the things that we're using internally is a tech called GLTF, which is an open standard for exchanging three-dimensional data for models. There's a few open well, actually, I don't think they're even open. There's a few standard file formats for like 3D models, and how do you encapsulate a 3D model with its textures and its animations. So, I think we're going to have a bunch of open standards that these metaverse platforms can leverage to achieve interoperability. But I agree wholeheartedly, just like you do, that it won't be a single cohesive experience. It's going to be a bunch of metaverse-like experiences. I'm sure some will be better than others, but at the end of the day, like the root here is it's going to be a 3D experience.
Yeah, for sure, because the standards may be open, but the kind of the essence of those metaverses and the intention behind them can be different. And I don't see anytime soon a way to make the open public permissionless blockchain compatible with a for-profit shareholder-oriented company that wants to put out an experience. It's a bit of a.
It's not compatible, and if someone says, yeah, that's exactly right. Exactly. So when I hear about companies that are for profit, on chain, promising open, I'm like, I'm out. I can't see a way forward with that type of solution. So I think having open standards, achieving some level of interoperability, and not focusing on one single platform. So the game engine we use is Unity 3D. And one of the things they do remarkably well is you build once and you can deploy almost anywhere. Now, there's some caveats. So if I build a game in Unity, I can run it on a PC, I can run it on Linux, I can run it on a Mac, iOS, Android, consoles, pretty much every console known to man. Now, again, I said there's nuances, but like they've really thought about this write once, deploy anywhere. So like I'm really interested in the tool chains that allow content creators to create content once and deploy into all of these metaverses so they can monetize where the players are. They're not going to be in one place, but they're going to be, in hundreds of places. And if I can create a 3D model or sneakers or whatever and deploy it, just like, if you write one piece of social media content, there's so many platforms that blast it to LinkedIn, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, etc. Like, I think that's where, as a technologist, I'd rather focus. I don't have any aspirations of building out some cloud GPU powered, massively distributed, game engine, which is what there's a company called Spatial. They have something called, it's actually Improbable. They have a platform called Spatial OS. They're doing some really cool work, and I think they're going to crack that nut. But like you said earlier, if I had a vote on who I'd like to win this, at least primarily it would be Roblox. I think they deserve it. Their user base appreciates them, and I think they're genuinely committed to doing good. I'm not saying the other companies are evil, but from what I know as an outsider, I respect them, and I think they deserve to win this.
Yeah, I tend to agree with you on the fact that Roblox have nailed probably the best experience in gaming creation for what we know as the metaverses right now. But let's see, right? Let's see how they can turn, if they are willing to, open up their assets and like Fortnite and all those games that have achieved massive success. They right now they don't have a motivation or incentive or a reason to provide real ownership of their in-game assets. If they're already, on the.
It's crazy today to think that Epic is a private company. Tim, I think his name is Tim Sweeney. He's the founder, and I don't know what percentage his ownership is, but I know it's a large percentage. But you're right, there is no motivation. That bothers me a lot. But again, it's mad respect. Busted his ass. He got there and he's doing a great job. But, me, like the fabric of Beau Button, thankfully, that's not how I think. So I think it's Roblox to lose. I don't think if they keep doing what they're doing, and ideally they would integrate and have some type of interoperability because they are kind of a closed ecosystem. But yeah, I mean, let's see. You never really know. There might be some, stealth project that comes out of left field. It's like, look, we've got everything from Fortnite, Roblox with an editor, and it's all open source. Deploy it wherever you want. Yeah. I'm like, oh, okay, well, this changes things.
Yeah, for sure. Well, it is a challenge. But so speaking about challenges, Beau, I want to always leave our audience and our users with some practical wisdom, knowledge, or some key insights or tip that you could give. 3 major kind of foundational tips that you would say, or you would tell any new Web3 founder or a business builder in general, entrepreneur that is wants to build something good in the space. What from your life lessons, what would be your top 3 kind of takeaways from how to build a good business?
Yeah, I think I'll start off with a rabbit hole that a lot of non-technical founders or people who aspire to be a founder but are not technical. The rabbit hole is, I can teach myself how to program, therefore I can build the product myself. I don't know how, what's the threshold before you say, I'm not capable of doing this? I am not an athletic person, and there are things in the tech space that I know that I'm not good at. And I think that's because I've been doing it for a very long time. So just like a musician, I've established this type of tuning where I'm like, I shouldn't be doing this. So it's not a good use of my time to go read or watch 100 videos, because no matter what I do, I just don't think that genetically or something about me is going to make me good at doing that. But I would say you really do need to know when to throw in the towel as it relates to, if you're going down that path where I have an idea, I don't have the capital to hire a company or a contractor or someone from Upwork or Guru. I always kind of advise folks, if they're non-technical but they have a great idea, don't rush to patent it. Don't spend a whole lot of money on trying to protect it. At the end of the day, find somebody. And again, this is a problem in itself. Find a technical person that you can either convince to go in with you as a co-founder, because if you can establish that chemistry and you're a business person and you're an ideas person, you've got a co-founder who's technical, who can actually do the work. I haven't seen that recipe fail, but I've seen the opposite fail often, where you've got a technical person who's like, I'm going to teach myself Ruby on Rails, I'm going to build a web application, and they got an idea, and it just becomes a nightmare.
And I'm going to be the salesman, I'm going to market it, I'm going to promote it, I'm going to try to raise funds, and I'm going to be the customer support. That's what I did
exactly.
with my
Look, there are days where you may need to do all of that, but you really need to be in tune with your own limitations. We do have limitations. Some of us aren't willing to admit it. It took me a long time to realize that I wasn't a superhuman. Early in my career, I could do everything because, quite frankly, it wasn't as complicated as it was or is today. So if you wanted to build a web app, I could do it all myself. But this is before the cloud. When they introduced the cloud, now there's a whole new discipline you have to understand. So I think the moral of that particular thing is you have to know where to draw the line in regards to what your limitations are, and don't be afraid to search for somebody to help you. And if that means there's equity that needs to be exchanged, it's worth it if you're convinced that your idea is good. That, from my experience, both as a founder who's always been the technical guy and people approach me, or as an outsider working with companies that are struggling because everybody at the round table has no idea how to build anything. They just have a bunch of ideas, and I'm like, ooh, this is dangerous. The second one is,
I think I can summarize it as, practice self-awareness so that you can build a good team that complements you and, fills
absolutely. Look,
you're not comfortable.
My partner today, Sami Khan, he's the CEO of the company. I wasn't a very close friend of his, but I was a very close friend of his older brother. But we're 2 peas in a pod. I hate to sound like my mom with these kind of like, oh, 2 peas, like these cute kind of expressions or analogies, but we complement each other very well. in our 6 years of doing business, we have not had one dispute, like not one. I hate, like not one. And honestly, there's probably only a dozen people in my life that I can say that about. So I'm fortunate enough to have found Sami, and likewise, I think he's
It's
appreciative of finding
particularly rare between CEO and CTO. just to
It is, it
be
is, it
clear.
is. And I think that's one of the reasons we've been successful, because we're not being distracted with all of that static that normally, surrounds a bunch of egomaniacal people who are like, oh, we're going to take over the world, we're going to get filthy rich. Yeah, we want to make money, but at the end of the day, we're very level-headed, and we know what we do well, and we know what the other one does well. So we often, hey, can you help me with this? I'll help you like that. It just works. But second thing is and I joke about it. I worked for a company right out of high school, and they went through this rebranding phase, and they chose this tagline that was "Failure is not an option." I hated it, and honestly, I didn't. It was unrelatable, and I get the spirit of it, but look, what they really meant was, you shouldn't look at failure as something that's bad. I mean, yeah, there's a negative connotation with failure. If you lose a football game or if you lose anything, like people are upset. But historically, for me personally, the things that I've tried and put 100% into, and that's really the key here, is like if you go 50% in, you're going to fail and you're probably not going to learn a lot. But if you go all in and you're committed to something and it fails, that experience is worth probably more than the opportunity was worth. Because the next time you find yourself there again, the analogy I use as a musician, I grew up playing musical instruments, but I'm not good at any of them. I was in the marching band, but I have a lot of friends that are like experts. I have a friend who's an expert percussionist, and like they just know things
I
about.
actually went far with it. I was producing music, playing live guitar. I released a couple of albums, was signed to a record
Oh, that's
label.
brilliant. That's where I wanted to be. Like I loved it. I just didn't have the eye-hand coordination. But like going back to like why that's important is ultimately what you learn from those experiences, you don't forget it. And I the only thing I can say is it gets baked into your DNA, and it's a subconscious thing. It's sort of like breathing. Once you find yourself in that situation again, you more often than not won't make that same mistake. So like lessons learned are very, very valuable. So don't be afraid to fail. I'm not saying throw in the white flag the minute you run and get, up against a brick wall. Again, that self-awareness thing, you need to be aware of like, all right, well, is there an opportunity to pick up and recover? If you hit that proverbial brick wall and you can't move forward, throw in the towel, move back, figure out if you pivot and go a different direction, etc. So like, don't give up. You have to be persistent. But look at failure as something. I hate to call it a positive thing, but it's not a negative thing. It's a neutral thing. It's valuable. If you keep doing things and you're giving your all and you're failing, at some point it will stick. And then the third one is, look, I read a lot. I don't read books. I've got this like TikTok like attention span, and it's toxic. But like I was on the internet at a very young age before short form video content was even a thing, and I used to read books. I would literally go to the public library, check out a book. I'd read the book on whatever topic it was from front to back. But after year, I started to like just read the chapters that I was interested in. And now I just read the paragraphs I'm interested in. So like, it's like, I know what I need to read, but I read a lot about different like topics. So it's not just tech, it's business, it's investing, etc. But like, you have to what I call is like, I call it like, and I use it like a data pipeline analogy. I've got this.
I only read tweets, which don't even make a paragraph nowadays.
Well, that's kind of where my brain is, but like I've learned how to like groom an article, and sometimes what I'll do is I use Microsoft Edge as my browser. I'll let it read out loud, so I'm not even looking at it. But the minute they start talking about something that I'm like, okay, then I'll turn and then I'll read it and I absorb, because I'm reading it and I'm hearing it. It's hard. It's taken me a long time, but like, just, you have to be well informed. So, I subscribe to a lot of blogs. I use an RSS aggregator. I've got probably 40 or 50 blogs that I read on a daily basis. Again, it's not like I'm spending 10 hours a day reading. It's probably 30 minutes to 40 minutes a day, but like, you just have to establish this flow of getting knowledge so you can make better and well-informed decisions. My fiance would say that I changed my mind a lot. I only change my mind when the inputs change. If I'm sitting
when you
still
have new
and there's
information,
no,
right?
that's exactly. I'm reacting. That's exactly right. I react to these new inputs. So I've kind of made myself work like a circuit. If I have different inputs, you should expect different outputs. So my goal as a human is to make sure that I've got respect it and trustworthy input so I can make better outputs.
For sure, for sure. And at the same time, that it's important to filter like noise from signal, and the good information that is useful from the barrage, especially with the rise of AI and automatically generated content. How do you distill the very valuable information? And
yes,
also to protect your own attention span, because that's what I've personally struggled with the most, especially in the Web3 space, which not only you're digging into the tech and you're building and you're interacting with the community, but then you have a price chart that's jumping up and down constantly and is dictating kind of the general feeling of the market, and something that you cannot predict. So let me summarize your two golden nuggets that you gave us. I had a great mentor called Jesse Elder, who always says failure is just an acronym for forever advancing in life. So when you fail,
I love that.
Yeah.
So, no, that distills like very nice. Failure is
and I think don't look for it to fail on purpose, but understand that failure should not be something that stops you from moving forward or pursuing what you want. So that's super valuable. And then the last one is always be informed, be open to new inputs, and know how to distill that signal from the noise, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, look, these are like electrical engineering terms, but like that's just how my brain, like, if it works for like electronics, it should work for me. I'm not an electronic, but like we're a circuit at the end of the day. But yeah, that's kind of a motto. It's like, it is hard to weed out the static, especially in this day and age. Like you're saying, like it's hard to is it real? Is it authored by some AI bot? But it takes time. But you got to start. You've got to get that ingest of knowledge, and you'll figure out what or how to weed things out.
Sure. So listen, Beau, this was an amazing episode. You give us a lot of golden, truly, priceless, valuable, actionable inputs for the builders in our audience. And I want to wish you the best of lucks with Atlas Reality. Make it a great success. We're all rooting for you. I would also invite you, to embrace the whole Web3 ecosystem. I know it's a lot of speculators, a lot of, it's different. It's difficult to suddenly turn your users into your investors, because now you suddenly have millions of owners that want to see, that are more involved and want to see a certain way to do things. But definitely, it's a great thing that you're considering it and getting involved. And yeah, thank you very much for coming on the pod.
Thank you, I appreciate it. It was an enjoyable experience. I love talking about these things. And look, I'm all in the future on Web3, and I share a lot of content on LinkedIn that might lead other the audience to believe that he's anti Web3. I have this, like I said, this innate ability to see through things, and I know it's coming, and we'll execute when it makes sense for us. But thank you for having me.
It's good to be a skeptic. We always have to, hold a level of skepticism, because that's the only thing that makes us improve. And most of my failures was just because I wasn't skeptic enough, and I would just went to, right, this is the future, and. Yeah, but anyway, Thanks, Beau, for being here. I'd love to have you back again, with new updates when you release your new game, and you can tell us more about it. So Absolutely. Let's keep in touch. I appreciate our connection.
Yes, that sounds great. I appreciate it. Look forward to it. You have a good day.
Yes, you too, Beau. Thank you.
Please keep in mind that none of what's said in this podcast should be considered financial advice. You are strongly recommended to do your own research and do not take anything we say in this podcast as a recommendation to buy or sell any assets whatsoever.
Thank you for listening to this episode of the Web3 Creators Podcast. Make sure you follow us on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and all of your favorite platforms. And if you're serious about building your own Web3 business, head over to web3creatordojo.com and check out our courses. That's web3creatordojo.com. See you soon, creators.